having somebody's bond issues paid off. It would be having stack of borrowed money. And you're gonna have we're gonna continue stacking money for our grandkids, and we're gonna end up having 7 or 8 bonds out here in 35 years.
The useful life, you know, this is not a situation, these are good questions, I'm glad you're asking them. But you may recall, one of the first things I said when we started talking about the 35-year term is we're putting asset, infrastructure in the ground that's going to be there for the next 50 years. So what isn't going to happen, it isn't a case where you're going to go out and you're going to buy a car, and that's a really sweet car, and you're going to take 6 years to pay it off, but in 3 years, it's not worth the amount of the loan. Okay, we don't want to put you in that position. That's just bad business. But we do want to keep the rates as, when I say rates, the water rates, as reasonable as possible, because you're talking about a $13, $14 million project. So we all know that the impact on your water rates is going to be material, right? So now, if we say we got to get this paid off as quick as possible, you can do that. I mean, you don't have to go 20 years, you don't have to go 35 years. We can go shorter, but that makes your annual payment on that loan higher, which means your water rate is going to be higher. So what we're trying to do is lead you down the path that doesn't put you in jeopardy for your grandchildren and your great-grandchildren having to pay for something that's no longer worth anything. At the same time, we're trying to get you through this difficult project without taking your water rates any higher than they have to go up, because we all know they're going to go up in a pretty sizable amount.
As far as the water, let's two questions about the water rates. If this is enacted as per the schedule here, when will water customers see their rates go up?
They would see the rates probably last quarter of the year at the earliest. Probably, the rates will be adopted in October.
Mm-hmm.
Technically, the fastest you could put them in play is you would read, let's say the rates are adopted October 1. And do you read the meters in cycle, or do they read them once a month? And when do they read?
15.
The 15th. Okay, so the first billing cycle, that's 100% after October 1st, would be your November reading, right?
It'd be October 15th to November.
Yeah,
15th.
but half of that reading would have been before. So the earliest you would see that would be when you bill your November 15th reading, which is probably billing December 1st. But that assumes you can work through with the computer people that set up your billing program. So practically speaking, you're probably going to say it's going to be in the January 19 bill.
So it could potentially raise anywhere from the November, December, or January bill, November and December of 2018, or January 2019. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think, probably wouldn't be any later than January of 19. Probably wouldn't be any earlier than December of 8.
So customers could expect their rates to go up at any time during that process, depending on how everything shakes out.
Yeah, and that will all be information provided at the rate hearing.
Now, in one of our other meetings, you indicated that you had done a cost analysis on those rates, and they were going to go up. You agreed with the mayor's figures that they would go up 140, 141%. What does this new rate and this new year loan, how does that increase the water rates? What percentage are we looking at
We're
there?
not prepared tonight to give you a report on the rates. We have additional information that we have to gather for this particular project, for this particular financing. So I'll be making that. We're hoping that well, let me put it this way. We know that you're not going to make a decision until you get that information, so we're going to try to get that to you as soon as possible. We're not in a position to get that to you tonight. I don't want to feel like I'm the moderator. Can we take questions from the public, or you want to do that?
Does the council have any further questions for Mr. Julian? Other questions for Mr. Julian or Mr. Speidel? You see?
The feds have discussed a 0.25%, like you talked about, they're gonna go up in through 2019. How much does that affect the bond rate? The bond
It's-
percentage?
It's not going to lockstep, you know, so if they move their short-term interest rates 25 basis points, I won't tell you the long-term interest rates will run 25 basis points, but there will be a correlation, there will be an adjustment, proximity along those lines, and because the SRF watches those rates to index their program rates, there will be an impact. But I can't say it's 25 basis points for 25 basis.
That's close.
Yes, sir.
Are you involved, I see your name on the paper, your company's name, you involved in anything happening to Peru, Wabash, something like that? I just see one Royal Center, once they got 4.4 million, when they got down branches on 1.4. Is this great journalism, or why am I seeing us being paid more, and I keep reading these articles in the paper where they got grants to take care of all this stuff? And some of it's got your names tapped in, you're involved in some of them.
And I try not to be involved with not to make a joke, that was a bad joke. If we're talking about millions of dollars of grants, we're talking about communities that are participating in the rural development program. To be eligible for grants of millions of dollars, there is an application process, it's a competitive process. The dollars that they're applying for have to be available from either the state pool or the national pool. And one of the most significant criteria to determine how much they're going to get is what their water rates are. And so if you're seeing a community that is getting millions of dollars in grants, you can anticipate that their water or sewer, if it's a sewer project, bills or rates are pretty high.
How can we get that? Like, they, 4.1 was in the paper last week, 4.4, and they ended up borrowing 1.4, the rest of it. How can we get that?
Well,
How can we get that $3 million grant so we don't have to pay for it?
I can say just a little bit, because I've worked on Royal Center
Okay, that's
with
what we're doing.
another person in his firm. And we've been working on Royal Center now for 3+ years. That's how long it took to finally get here to start construction. And even though there is significant grant money there, when you look at why they got that, it's because the amount of ratepayers that they have in Royal Center practically could not pay off the cost of the project. They had to buy down the rates to what that community could afford. Plus, I believe they look at your median income level for grant awards
Well,
like
what
that.
We're not rich here, so we're just saying, they got
I'm just
870
saying,
million.
you think you would qualify, but when you compare yourselves to these other applicants, you'd be surprised.
well, just, and run the simple math, it took 3+ years, all right? So let's say 5% inflation on construction costs. So
And we did have to go ask for more money, because bids came in high, no surprise. Because the estimates were 3 years
3 years
old.
old. So, I mean, if we're looking at, this is $11 million, so you're talking about $550,000 in construction cost increases. So that like $3 million grant, it's not really a $3 million grant, because of 3 years inflation, it's more like $1.5 million. Now, $1.5 million is not, I'm not saying turn your nose up at $1.5 million, but you have to be careful in terms of, you know, what you're going after doesn't actually get you as much bang for your buck as you possibly can. And so, as I mentioned, the bond ordinance, that is the legal document that puts you in a position to do this, authorizes you, it gives you the authorization to go in any of those 3 programs we talked about, RD, SRF, or open market. And that's the flexibility that you need, because the decisions on who gets grants and who doesn't get grants isn't made here in Delphi, it's made by somebody else.
Yes, ma'am.
I have about 4 questions. Will the new rates that you're looking at putting into the ordinances, will those be known to the council by next Tuesday's meeting?
No.
Okay? What happens if we go into the pool program and apply for this 35-year loan at 4% and don't get the amount that we're asking for? Then we have to go to the open market?
We're not going to the open market until, well, let me answer the questions. If we get through the process by October, we'll be in the pool program. It's not a competitive, it's not that we got knocked out by somebody else. If we're gonna get knocked out, it's because we aren't ready to move forward. So the money would be there if you're ready to ask for it.
Okay, I have another question. In a conversation or a communique that went back between Mr. Spidell and I believe the mayor, he had stated a concern from him that the SRF gets concerned at closing if you don't have construction bids but estimates. So are we looking at applying for this loan based on one estimate, or do we have some construction bids from other engineering firms?
That's a good question. If we're in the traditional subsidized pool program, we have to have bids. If we're in the pool program, if we can give them assurance that you're moving forward, which is why that's why we have to do this in October. That's the assurance that you're going to move on this project. You do not have to have bids, although they prefer it.
Right.
Now, the reason that they'll give Delphi that consideration of not having construction bids in place are, one, you're going to have the bond ordinance adopted, and you're going to have the rate ordinance adopted. In addition to that, this is only the first step of the project. Now, I can't tell you what construction bids are going to come in at, but they will not come in precisely at $11,875,000. They're going to be something on. So we have that second pool of borrowing that will true up. You won't close the second loan until you have construction bids in place.
Then my last question is, does anybody know what the taxes and government charges will be for this loan transfer that will be borne by the city?
The interest rate we're estimating for this first phase, it's an estimate, is 4%.
What about the taxes and government charges for the transfer of the loan?
There are no associated fees.
Because that was also in the paperwork that was provided regarding this process. And it states that those will be borne by the city, so I just wanted to know what those might come in to be.
The,
Maybe register a paying agent costs?
which there won't be, because with the state, Leanne will fill that role. There is cost associated. I'm gonna. First of all, there is a $1,000 fee that can't come out of the loan that the city will have to pay to SRF to participate in the program.
Okay.
That is the only fee associated with it. The bonds will need to be registered, and a designated individual to make sure that the check is, that twice a year, the check is written the appropriate amount, and the monthly transfers into all these things that Leanne handles, and you'll continue to do that for that highly compensated position that you.
Yeah, right.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
When you were talking about it's based on the community income and all of that, I don't know if you're aware, but our school corporation that sits in the city is at more than 50% poverty. That increase that we're talking, 141%, there's gonna be people moving out of this town. And then that, in turn, makes the people that are staying, their rates are gonna have to go up in order to cover that cost. There has got to be another way to get money or to lessen this project in more than 2 phases in order for the people that are staying or we're gonna lose a chunk of this community. And our school has already lost, I think, 200 students in the last less than 10 years. We can't take any more loss. There's got to be something else that can be done, and I don't think 2 phases is enough. Why not 4? Why not fix what we've got now, connect what we've got now, and see if that works temporarily to get us to that next phase? Bump that up by 20% and then another 20%. Because 141%, quite frankly, I don't know if I'm gonna stay. I'm a mother with 2 children. I work for the government. I don't make a lot of money, and to my water bill to go up to $100 a month. I don't know if I can afford that.
I mean, that question touches on so many aspects of the project. I can't answer all of them, but what I can tell you is those comments resonate, I'm sure, with all of us. I've been doing this for a long time. When you're talking about, I'm going to go on my soapbox here a little bit, indulge me if you would. You know, we're not talking about anything other than essential services when you're talking about clean water, drinking water. I mean, this is as fundamental as it gets. And that's why we, as part of the working group, try to find all the solutions, not the easiest solution, but all the solutions that ultimately get you the project that you need at the lowest cost possible to keep those rates as reasonable as possible. Because this is, I mean, this isn't, I mean, your comments are spot on in terms of if we lose customers, the bond payers aren't going to, the people that own the bonds, SRF is not going to say, well, only pay us 80% of the loan because no, they're going to say the rates have to go up for who's left. So that's why it's so critical that we try to find the right solution. And the right solution is a combination of the right funding plan and the right project. And I know, I remember hearing about this project when it first started coming to your community, and it was 7, 8 years ago that you've been talking. And so you've been evaluating a project with a fair amount of due diligence to get to this point. So it's still going to be, it's still a multi-million-dollar project, and it's going to impact your water rates. You're going to notice it. The only thing I can tell you is I know that the working group that's been helping the city with this, and the city decision makers as well, are looking to find that solution that gets you the project that you need at the lowest cost you need to do everything you can to not only keep existing customers, but give you capacity to grow and actually share that cost with more customers than you have today.
But to be clear, this is about a supply issue, not a quality issue, correct? We don't have rancid water.
Yes, some sulfite issues in
Yes.
existing wells, which is a quality issue.
And that's fine, but we're not talking, we're talking that the majority of this situation is quantity. Your comment acted like we've all of a sudden got to get decent water here. We've got decent water. We don't have enough water, but we've got decent water, and some of us is better than others, but still, it's a quantity issue, to be clear, correct?
You know the reason why you would do this project far better than the accountant. I trust that.
But that's what you said. That's all I was asking.
Well, if I said anything that implied I was knowing what the engineers knew, and your administrative staff know, and you individuals as council member know, I apologize for that, because this is your project. But I do know, given the amount of effort that's been put into this, that I feel, based on what I've seen and heard, that this is the project that you want and need. Now, whether it's a quality issue or a quantity issue or a combination of that, That's really not my call to make, but I do understand that this is the project that you want and you need.
Yes, ma'am.
I'm gonna kind of piggyback on what Sharon was talking about. A couple of things here. First of all, the different parts of phase 1 and 2, they're broken down into different projects. So in phase 1, you said something about well 7 to be connected to the system.
Yes, ma'am.
What would it cost to just do that? And nothing else? Just that part? Do you have a cost for that?
675 for construction, right? Somewhere around 675,000 for construction, add on another 12%, you're looking 900,000 to $1 million.
Okay, so roughly $1 million to just do that part?
Correct.
Okay, so, why can't we just do that part? Because isn't that the well that has the majority of the water that would help us at this point? And then if we did that, then could we not, put the other parts of it in different phases to stretch it out? But also, what happens if we default on this loan or we can't pay it back? Let's say the worst case scenario happens and we do lose a lot of people in this community and we lose the majority of our ratepayers and then we can't pay this back, what happens?
Well, I guess I'll go to the first question, and Fearless isn't here, so Fellow Farmer, you guys can piggyback, but the reason to do well 1 and well 3, so well 3 has a sulfide treatment. Well 3 is real bad with sulfide, so we have the ground storage tank, the aeration, and then connecting it to the rest of the system. The reason to do that is kind of multi-reasons, but first thing is that we don't know well 1 won't have sulfides in the future. I can't remember how many hours we did the pump test. It was 25? 25?
Well 7.
Oh, well 7, what did I say?
You're telling me about well 1.
All right, sorry, well 7,
Yeah.
replace everything I said about well 1.
Okay, thank you.
Well 7.
I was gonna wait till you got a little further. but- Okay.
So well
All right.
7, we only did a 24, 48-hour pump test, I believe. While Fearless believes there's a shelf in there that separates the sulfide water from the water without sulfides, there's a possibility that we could run into sulfides the more we pump it, in which case we would have to aerate it, send it through the ground storage tank and everything.
Right.
Another reason is the firm capacity, so we're operating under the assumption that wells 4 and 5 are going to go dry in the near future. At that point, we would only have well 1, I mean to say well 1 this time, well 6 and well 7. Well 7's got, I think, 1,200 gallons per minute capacity.
Yes.
What's that?
Yes.
Well 1 and 6 combined wouldn't provide us the firm capacity because again, you have to calculate your system without your largest producer. So we wouldn't have the capacity between just wells 1 and 6 to supply the city with what we need.
But with the 7 online, would that help? Would it get us there?
Not if wells 4 and 5 are down.
If they're not down, okay.
Right, wells 4 and 5 are operational right now. We're right on the edge of meeting our peak day demand. But we're operating under the assumption that wells 4 and 5 are going to go dry in the near future, whether it's due to drought, stone quarry operations, canal activities.
Near future, year 2, 3, 4, what do you mean by near future?
Fearless could speak to that better than I can, but they've got projections based on the decrease in the static water level and increase in production that showed.
Could it get us through another year, you think, at least? I mean,
It depends on a variety of factors. Drought's a big one, which we've had pretty wet summer. But stone quarry operations, I know they've indicated that they're not going deeper in the next 5 years, but we're right on the edge, as I understand it, of one dry summer, and we might not be able to produce out of wells 4 and 5.
okay. What if we default on the loan?
That's a jump question.
The history of defaulting on municipal bonds in Indiana is almost non-existent, so that really have no expectation that would happen. What would happen is if your customer base decreases, you will increase the rates to offset that.
It'll just go higher?
The rates would have to go higher, yeah.
So when does the breaking point for the residents come? When do you consider that just unreasonable for us as residents? I mean, you've been doing this for a long time, so you tell me. Well, if you lived here, what would be your breaking point?
Keep in mind a 60% poverty rate for the entire
the way to answer that is there are communities in Indiana that have combined water sewer bills well over $150 a month. There are places that have sewer bills. They're growing, the list grows more each year. They're well over $100 a month. We've worked quite a bit with some areas to try to get creative financing through the SRF to help buy those rates down. So to answer your question, and these are places that are not economically different than Delphi, but when that's why I said, there's nothing more fundamentally important than drinking water and sanitary sewage. And you can't get by without it. That's why you're even thinking about taking on these multi-million-dollar projects to begin with. So your rates are there are places in the state that have significantly higher rates than you have, and will have higher rates than you have with this project.
But when you have a household budget and you can't afford something, you scale back. And this needs to be scaled back so it's affordable for the budgets of the people who live here.
Yes, sir.
My name is John Gingrich. I live on the South Hill. I've lived in the same place for 51 years. If my water bill climbs to what you're saying, I am leaving Delphi. Guaranteed, and that's a promise. That's not a threat, that's a promise. This whole process that we're going through right now, to me, seems like it's trying to be rammed down our throats. We had something to get water from Flora. There was a second study done. It was not comparing apples and apples. It was comparing apples and oranges because it was figuring a different size line. I think the whole business, all the paperwork that's been done, ought to be put in the restroom.
Probably clog the toilet.
It might, so maybe somebody needs to eat it.
I have a question.
Yes, sir.
Say we do approve the engineering project. Seems like that's what that's what we're for to do. How long do you estimate the project of $13 million is gonna last before we have to come back and do this all over again?
The water main infrastructure will last well longer than 50 years. The tanks that are being built with rehabilitation will far exceed 50 to 75 years for that infrastructure investment with that maintenance. Wells typically last 75 to 100 years. Peerless has weighed in based on the quarry operation, what they anticipate for the useful life of that. It greatly exceeds the 35 years that you have, as John pointed out, for your long term.
Okay, whenever we get to the tank parts, I've got some questions about those.
Sure, and those are in phase 2. One of the problems that we've had with Armory Road tank, to take that tank out of service and still provide service to people on the south side of town, it can't be done without a major interruption to those customers.
Can't be any worse than what it is now.
Without water, I would say would be worse.
Well,
That would be
mine's
possible.
almost that bad. The other night, my water was basically shut off.
Or a boil order if it doesn't maintain pressure. So that's why the tank rehabs, it's important that they be done after the new wells are in place. You get the new companion ground storage tank at Armory Road, then you can take the existing Armory Road tank out of service, still provide water to people on the south side of town while you're doing the painting and rehab of the Armory Road tank. That tank has needed rehabilitation for 20 years. They've not been able to take it offline for a 2 to 3 month period to do the painting. It's been inspected by IDEM. It's going to get to the point where they will say, take this tank out of service if you don't rehab it. that's critical, and that's why the tank rehabs are shown in phase 2 rather than phase 1, to minimize the disruption of service for people who live on the south side of town.
I think Councilman Chockley had a question, and we'll go to the public.
Yeah, when I went through all the information here that the mayor gave us, and the pictures and stuff, I worked with the Anderson Corporation for over 25 years. When you get 8 foot off the ground, you have to have, according to the EPA, you have to have a ring that goes around that ladder that goes up the side of that tank. Every tank that I looked at doesn't have that. Have you included that in your instruction? I see nothing about wrapping those ladders with rings. I only seen one place in there where they said you put a safety catch, where that is, where you go up so high and you put a lid down to catch, so that if you happen to fall, you don't fall close to the ground. Our tanks were 100 foot high, roughly. And there were 3 different steps that you had to take in order to get to the top of that tank. I'm wondering if that was if that's included in your engineering project. Or if you considered that as a safety thing.
Yeah, that has not been considered in terms of rehabilitation.
The new tanks would.
Okay.
Thought there was only gonna be one new tank.
There's one at Carrollton Road and one at Armory Road.
Oh, yes.
Those are ground storage, right, Matt? They're not elevated, they're ground storage.
Yeah.
So new tanks will be OSHA compliant, safety requirements.
Public, Mr. Watson? No.
Gotcha.
IPC, have you got the word from them? How much water they're gonna need, how much you're willing to take out of this? If they drop the percentage 20%, we're really in bad shape. And before we go any further, don't you think we need something for them?
We're planning on meeting with them in the next few weeks. They've been busy with the acquisition of the plant in Kentucky, so they weren't able to meet in the last.
But do you wanna push forward anything here and say, you know how much water they're gonna want in the future?
Yes.
It would change what we need to do dramatically, I would think. Based on what, this year I'll take this much, this year I'll take this much, I'll take this much. If we're gonna scale back, which the usage went down last year, we may not need quite a big project.
I mean, I guess that's an engineering, I mean, in terms of the wells are gonna produce what they're gonna produce. The size of the lines may vary. I don't know how much, if they reduce by 100 or 200,000 gallons a day, that would change the size of the tank or the size of the pipe. If they were reducing production, they're increasing production, the same thing both ways.
Right. The current design maintains the existing flow.